Sarah Budd is an organizational and leadership psychologist specializing in helping teams and organizations increase their effectiveness. She's an executive and leadership coach, ICF PCC, certified in Clifton Strengths and Hogan assessments, as well as Cantor structural dynamics and whole person coaching. Sarah holds a master's in organizational psychology and a PsyD in leadership psychology. She is in my cohort and she is amazing. And I can't wait to have this conversation with Sarah Budd. So you're going to want to stick around. Welcome to Rat Race Reboot. I'm your host, Laura Noel. And as a certified coach and former 27-year military leader, each week I provide bite-sized mindset pivots that will help you reset your mind, reawaken your spirit, and regain your control. All right, everybody, welcome to another episode of Rat Race Reboot. I'm really excited to have a member of my cohort, my colleague, Dr. Sarah Budd, fellow PsyD, and I'm super excited about this conversation. So first and foremost, Sarah, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here and talk with you.
Oh, me too. I've been looking forward to this for a long time. I don't know why we waited so long to do this, but here we are. Well, just as I start out all of my podcasts when I have an amazing guest on the show, is I'd love to hear a little bit about your journey. How did you get to the point in your career where you decided to become an organizational psychologist and help people in the way that you're doing these days?
Yeah. Okay, there's a little story. So my undergrad is in psychology, and I thought I would go into clinical psychology, into counseling in some way. And then I had kids. I have 4 kids, and I kept having a new kid every time I started a new grad program. One was born on spring break, came with me for the last couple of weeks of class, sitting in the lectures, and I realized I would much rather take a nap than keep writing papers. So put everything on pause for a few years, and then as the kids were getting older and my youngest is going back into kindergarten, I thought I probably need a job. I probably need to make some money. And my husband was like, you know what? You should take a year off. You've been doing everything for all the kids for so long. You should do whatever you want for a year. And I thought, yes, I like you. I knew I liked you. Yes. So I did all the things that you do, right? That you can't when your kids are around, watching the shows that you don't want them to see, or like eating bonbons or doing whatever. It actually took me 3 days to find something that would count as a bonbon. And then
That's hilarious.
And then it got boring, right? You do that for a little while and you get bored. And I thought, if I don't have any financial pressure, what I really love doing is teaching people about StrengthsFinder. I had gone through the book, the assessment, all the stuff in years past, and it was life-changing for me. And I thought it would be so fun to be able to bring that to other people. And so I started putting together workshops. I got myself certified in StrengthsFinder. I did my first workshop on my birthday of that year. It was kind of a gift to myself in some way. And as I was doing that work, it was clear that there's more than this, right? That this is really great at focusing on individual people and what's going on for them, and even interactions between them. But there's so much more there. And I knew I wanted to finish that grad school degree, so I was looking at different programs, and I found William James with organizational psychology, and it just felt like the right match. So I got involved in that program. I was continuing to build my business. I have an independent consultancy offering more than the strengths workshops, right? More coaching, more different competencies. And then the doctorate was always on my radar, but it had to be timed at the right time.
Yeah.
The kids at this point were teenagers, and when COVID came around, all their schedules came to a halt, right? There was no more soccer practice or volleyball practice, all the things that were taking all my time playing taxi driver. So it was the right time, and I was able to jump into that, which so excited. It was a life goal to be able to finish that doctorate, and to continue the work to expand my understanding of how I can be helpful to people in their own leadership, in their ability to team, in their ability to be effective as they're working with other people.
I love that. And oh my gosh, you're so right. I don't think I could sit still for very long. I think I would get bored and want to find something, a purpose. So when you went into this PsyD program, first of all, congratulations,
Thank
by the
you.
way.
And you too.
Thank you. Thank you. No, it's an exciting time. And you're talking about helping leaders develop teams or more effective teams and helping leaders be more effective. What
Mhm.
did you think when you were going into the PsyD? What was lacking in that realm that you wanted to really address?
That's a great question. I'm not sure that I know what I thought was lacking. Well, there's very little training for
Yeah.
anyone who's like being promoted into a leadership role from a production role,
Yeah.
um, and very little awareness of what's available to help
Mhm.
with that. Right. So my husband is in a senior leadership role, and I kind of test all these things on him. Have you heard of this? Have you heard of this?
Yeah.
And anytime he comes back with, "Oh, that's brilliant," okay, this is something that could be really useful, or on clients in general. Right. What actually suits your need. Um, so even a structure, I love the GRPI model, the goals, roles, process, interpersonal dynamics, right? 80% of the team tension can be traced back to goal misalignment. And even just that idea, most of the leaders that I work with are not aware of how important it is to be aligned on the goal that we're working toward very specifically.
Yeah.
There's just so much available that we're not aware of. So many leaders aren't aware of.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a conversation I've been having a lot lately when I go into organizations and I'm facilitating. And when I'm talking to other leaders, such as yourself, that who have consultancies and who are working with teams and leaders, the roles, the goal, of course, we have to be in alignment. Alignment keeps coming up in these conversations. So we have to have something to align ourselves with first and foremost. And then, you mentioned the goals and the roles. Having that role clarity is so important because otherwise we have those blinders on and we don't know what's in our lane, what's in our swim lane,
Right.
and then how am I, because we're all interconnected, we should be, the different roles, and how do we impact each other and our ability to do
Yeah.
our work?
Yeah, absolutely. So much overlap with who's responsible for what and where's it going, or those gaps that are missing, right? And kind of related to that is the other idea that I love more than anything is just self-awareness, leadership self-awareness. How are you impacting the results that you're getting? So often as leaders, we say, okay, here's a problem. And we can find all kinds of reasons for those problems, usually outside of ourselves, right? Usually
Yeah.
the people we're interacting with or a structure, which are
Yeah.
valid. But very often we are also impacting the results. We are producing, because of the way that we show up, we repeatedly get the same result in some way. And so
Yeah.
building that self-awareness around how are you impacting the result that you're getting in the way.
Yeah. Yeah. So like often our results are mirroring back to us
Yeah,
who we are as leaders.
yeah, absolutely.
We own that.
Hmm. Hmm. And there's a lot that we can do with our own awareness of what we're asking for, what our expectations are, and how we're using those to interact with other people that changes the results that we're getting or that smooths the way in some sense.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. And so now that you're transitioning out of the role of student and doing this more expansive version of the work you've been doing in your
Yeah.
consultancy, what are some exciting ways that you're helping leaders bridge that gap and navigate through this to be more effective?
Yeah. I've got a new workbook that's coming out. It's called Free Yourself from Leadership Cosplay. And it's the idea that we're often pretending to be a version of a leader that we've seen other people be, and what would happen if you led as yourself.
Mm.
And it's taking you through a series of questions that help you identify what it looks like to lead as yourself. We often aren't aware of that, right? We're just so,
Yeah.
we've seen all these other pictures so often. So it's a series, it's an in-depth workshop. It's not meant to be your first foray into self-awareness, right? It's meant to be
Yeah.
building for people who have done it before. But series of categories or prompts that are taking you through different areas to be aware of things like um, different role tensions. Often we're playing multiple roles and how those two roles can be in tension in a certain meeting, pulling us in different directions. Um, Things like power dynamics, what your ideal leadership role even is, your strengths, your values. Um, there's about 14 different categories that goes with. And then I've got this Oracle deck that goes with it that are just the one-off questions that could be helpful in a moment before you go into a meeting, as you start your day. Just reflective questions to kind of help put you in that space of being intentional in how you're showing up with whatever space you're in.
Oh, I love that. And so there's so many reasons why a leader would want to be in alignment with themselves and show up as that leader. Why do you think that's important? Why there's so much goodness
Yeah.
in
I
doing that.
I think it directly speaks to our capacity and to how much we can offer, how much we can show up in that way. The more that we are operating out of our own strengths, out of our own values, as opposed to trying to put on somebody else's, the more whole that we show up, and the more that we're able to deliver in some way or to communicate. We're not spending all of our energy trying to fit into this pretend role that we think
Yeah.
we're supposed to be. We can just come in. Plus, there are so many great contributions to be made from all the different perspectives. If we're all trying to take on this one idealized role, we're missing all the rest, right? There's so many other contributions to be made from different perspectives, different values, different experiences. And it's important that they all have space to be contributed.
Yeah, I know that kind of gets into the cost of not showing up as yourself
Absolutely. Yeah.
and creating that environment where leaders understand when you're developing leaders around you, how do you develop them to lead as their best self,
Yep.
sharing the gifts that they have? Because the cost of not doing that, to your point, is we're missing things. We have carbon copies
Yep.
of that one leader, and then there's aspects of that leadership that are just absent.
Absolutely. I think it also can get real close to a societal danger of assimilation. There is
Mhm.
one way to be. Kind of this, I'm going to use the word patriarchal assumption of how things are to be, right? And there's all these other ways to show up in that are needed, but that we're trying to force people into this one single lane of this is correct and the rest are wrong. And
Yeah.
to be simple, I think that's wrong.
Yeah, I wish I had this background. I wish I met you when I was in the service.
Mm,
Um, because I had risen to the rank of E9, which is the top 1% of the enlisted ranks. And yet I felt like a square peg in a round hole. Like I felt like I didn't fit in. And there were positions that rank could fill. And I had my senior leaders wanting to push me to them. And I would say, no, I'm good here,
yeah.
because my vision of a leader was a boisterous man. And I
Ah,
had an avatar of what that leader looked like, what they walked like, what they sounded like, how they communicated with people. And it wasn't me. And
yeah.
so as a result, I held myself back. So that's another cost. Think about, the people who are up and coming, who have the leadership skills, different aspects of that leadership that can kind of fill in and round out those blind spots that we have on our teams. We're missing out,
Yeah.
holding ourselves back even.
Right, right. So the people on the front line aren't going to be able to do it if their leadership doesn't permit it in the first place, right? And for their leadership to permit it, they also have to be doing it. And sometimes we think that, the more you get into senior leadership, you're talking about the E9 level.
Mhm.
The more you get into senior leadership or the C-suite, like they've got it figured out and they're showing up the way they want to be showing up. And that is not the case, right?
Yeah.
There's so many senior leaders that are also trying to fit into the mold of what it's supposed to look like.
Yeah.
And working almost against their own selves in a way that feels unnatural. That's
Yeah.
exhausting and can lead to burnout. It can lead to all kinds of things. Yeah.
Yeah, because you got to work twice as hard
Yeah.
to do something that's unnatural to you, in a way that's unnatural to you.
Yeah.
And you're getting me thinking that, yeah, this isn't just the C-suite level. We've got to think about developing this, or talking about this at all levels. Because when you
Yeah.
think about succession planning, it's like, oh,
Yeah.
you're a senior leader, now you can be yourself.
Right.
No,
Yeah.
it's like I've been walking around trying to be this mold. It doesn't, and that's the paradigm,
Yeah.
right?
Yep. Yep. As we talk about authenticity, right? We
Mhm.
talk about inclusion. I had one leader ask me, how do I get my mid-level managers to be more authentic. We promoted them for a reason. We want them to show up as them. And they felt like they were trying to fit in that mold. And my thought was authenticity is not something you can directly aim for. You have to create an environment where it can then bloom, right? And then your environment that you're focused on is being an inclusive environment. So that there are multiple ways to show up, and that's all good. We value all those multiple ways, and then you get that more authenticity. And I don't think that's possible to do when we, as the senior leader, are in a space where we're still we think that there's one way, right? We have to work on our own ability to show up as ourselves so that we can be inclusive to other people as well, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we have to model what we want to see and make it safe for others to do the same.
Right. And to do that, we have to have done our own work first.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. And so are you finding this kind of phenomenon just in the work that you're doing, that you've been doing with executive leaders, and that's why you created this this workbook?
Yeah. I mean, I can't tell you how many times our coaching conversations revolve around what if there were other options? What if it wasn't just trying to fit into this one thing or this one decision that feels like it's constricting you too much, right? What if we created other options? What would it look like to actually show up? What choice would you make if you had the availability to make any choice you wanted? It seemed like it was coming up in a lot of conversations, and it seemed like this is one of the things that grabs my attention the most, right? That I'm most excited about. Just that the intentionality available when you've done that self-awareness work, that you can make a choice where you're leveraging these choices as opposed to trying to recover from them or repair from them. Does that make sense in that phrase?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I'm definitely with you. I'm curious what your experience has been with leaders who then, when they're having this coaching, these ahas of like, okay, what would that look like if I were really leading as myself and not an avatar of somebody else?
Yeah.
What are some, without getting into details, but what are some outcomes that you've seen for leaders, like just even in how they felt or how they led or with their team?
Yeah. Like, so even just a micro example, just tiny. There was a leader who, as many of us are, was in back to back meetings constantly, and they're just feeling exhausted and like they can't actually get where they're trying to get in all of these meetings. And as we're talking through options and possibilities, we thought about what if we redesigned the format of the meeting, the one that you're leading, because you're not leading all of them, to work better for you. What would that look like? And through a series of conversations, they eventually landed on simply adding 2 minutes to just breathe and think when everyone's sitting in the room. So we're just all going to have a quiet moment for 2 minutes. And that was just a tiny change that they could implement in their one meeting of the day. And it changed the way the entire meeting went for them, right? Because they recognized that need for themselves. And it turns out it's a common need for most of the people that were showing up in their meetings, that they didn't have to stick with the structure that everyone else was doing. They could make an addition in that way. On a larger scale, working with people with strengths, for instance, that's still one of my favorite frameworks. And thinking about which strength are you leading? And by leading, I mean living. Are you living most strongly? And is it working for you? Are you getting the results that you want? And if not, what would it look like to make an adjustment in that way? So one person, let me think. I have an example top of mind, but I don't necessarily want to use that one. So I'm trying to think about another example. One person was realizing that most of their strengths had to do with strategic movement and that they weren't being personable enough in their situation. They felt like that was lacking for themselves. So they're still honed in on what it looks like to be them specifically, but they worked on trying to kind of marriage between that strategy and the space for that personal interaction, just changing the way that they showed up in a way that they recognized would work for them better. They'd get the result they wanted more effectively than, because the result they were getting by not being personable didn't make those long-lasting relationships that sustained them through any ups and downs in the organization. So just kind of dialing up that aspect of it. I find it's really about being able to make the intentional choice for recognizing what's working for me and what is working against me. And if we haven't done that self-awareness work to know what it is that we're doing, it's really hard to be intentional. The choices aren't available to us in the same way.
Yeah. Yeah. There's always that choice, and
Yeah.
that's an important element here.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
So
there's
talk,
opportunity. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Talking to another coachee about what do they want to be known for. And they're picking one of their strengths, that this is the one that they want to be known most for. And so what does that actually look like? And they're outlining within their daily responsibilities how they would be showing up in a different way if they knew that their reputation was going to be for this particular strength, right? And
Mm.
again, it's about making the intentional choice, making little micro adjustments to free yourself for this is my strength. I've been trying to mimic those person's strengths, and those aren't even mine, right? Or I've been trying to show up in the same way as that person over there, but it works against me. It makes me feel exhausted at the end of the day.
Yeah, yeah. I recently had a guest on the show, Luis Scott, and there was something that he said in the beginning of our conversation that really resonated with. I wrote it down. He said, I think it was his father who told him, "You define the moment, or it defines you." And I
Mm-hmm.
find this applicable here when we don't exercise our choice and we're
Yeah,
not aware that we have a choice to begin with. So we get to choose how we show up in any given circumstance or any given moment. And if we don't exercise that choice, that moment or that situation or circumstance will drive us. It'll define us. It'll own us. It'll lead us instead of us taking leadership of
right.
ourselves and
Yep,
how we show up in any environment.
absolutely. That reminds me of James Clear's Atomic Habits. Have you read that
Yeah.
book? Yeah.
Oh yeah.
That idea, who had it, right? That's a great one.
Yeah.
That idea that every action that you're taking is making a vote for the person that you're about to become.
Mm-hmm.
And that when you, so whether you worked out in the morning or you didn't, right? Whether you came into this meeting patiently with
Yeah.
curiosity about what's their perspective or you didn't, it's all a vote. And it's not necessarily that this one time I made the mistake and now this is who I am and I'm stuck here. But that there's always another vote to be made, another choice to be made going forward, right? To who you
Mm-hmm.
aspire to be.
Yeah. Eh, to your point, like that clarity of who we want to become has to be front and center of our mind at all times. I remember somebody who was in some personal development seminars with me as an attendee. I remember them saying that when they would go to a restaurant, they would sit down and they would say, how would an athlete fuel their body?
Exactly. Yep.
So, yeah. So it's like how, so we have to cut out the noise and clear the space so that we can think. So we're not driven to be something that we're not, because that's like the knee jerk,
Yeah.
repetitious response.
Right.
It's how we're wired because that's how society is around us. But now we have the ability to think. So going in, like entering into a room, how would this leader, how would this empathetic leader or this driven leader or this caring leader, whatever that is, how would they engage with this person?
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly, and to choose one, right? So the empathetic leader, how would they engage in this scenario, and to
Mhm.
practice that for enough time that that becomes our habit, our
Yeah.
knee-jerk reaction, right? And then we can add the next one.
Yeah.
Um, but that, yeah, yep, absolutely.
So I'm hearing some things here. One, some themes in a lot of these conversations. One is we have to get clear on who
Mhm,
we are or who we want to be. Um, we have to be willing to be that person.
mhm,
Heard you say take little micro steps,
yep,
like micro habits to build it in. And you mentioned to be deliberate
yeah,
about it.
yeah. Yep, to build some intentionality, and I think especially in our, again, I have 4 teenagers. We are knee deep in phone culture, right? And always being
Yeah.
distracted with the phone is always on. It's just kind of a default. And we get into these places where we don't even realize that time has passed,
Mhm.
right? How much time has passed, and it just happened. But to actually go back and to make choices about how do I want to spend this next hour? How do I want to show up in this meeting? What do I want my reputation to be? I have some control over that.
Yep.
How do I want to be known as a leader? How do I want to be interacted with? What's important to me? What's going to make me feel as I wrap up my career? as I make a career choices, what will make me feel like that was great. That was a good use of my time, of my life. I'm satisfied with where that went.
Yeah. Yeah. Because how we choose to show up, we're offering a person for people to respond to. And
Yep.
people are responding to how we're showing up, not, the energy behind that and the thoughts we're having and how we're seeing other people. And, yeah, it sets this kind of chain reaction.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, talk about impacting the results you're getting, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Oh my gosh. This is gold here. You know, we have so much power
Hmm.
to show up as who we want to show up, who we envision being now. We don't have to wait until we get there. In fact, we get there when we start being that person now.
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah. That's
Yep.
really powerful.
Yeah. One of my favorite like prompts that I give myself is, that person that you aspire to be. What choice do they make right now? Similar to the person going into the restaurant, right? If
Yeah.
that's the person I aspire to be, what choice would they make in this moment? Because it's just so easy to just go through things, right? And to just react.
Yeah.
But to keep in mind every action, my dog, that every reaction
Jasper.
is
Yeah.
making a vote for who will become and moving forward with intentionality.
I love that. Yep. That's so in alignment with, I always tell people, make the decision like the person you want to become, because if we're deciding as the person we are, then we're going to keep creating the same. And it's like, we're moving laterally. We think we're busy. So sometimes it makes us feel good because we're,
Right.
motion versus what action. I think James Clear talks about that too.
Probably so.
Yeah.
And there are times when that's a great choice, right?
Yeah.
When the choice is I just need to stay where I am. I just need to sustain and
Yep.
do it with intentionality and enjoy it, right? No guilt. But when
Yeah.
it's time to move forward, do that with intentionality as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Ah, so good. I have so enjoyed this conversation.
Me too.
Is there anything that we've left unsaid or anything that you would like to leave our audience with?
I'm sure we could talk much more. We've left much
We-
unsaid.
yeah.
About this idea though, and this idea of moving forward with intentionality. I think if I had one encouragement to give, it would to be experiment and start. Go with something small, and just try, see what happens, and move it forward. Um, Meaning practice it, right, and make adjustments as you go, almost like a yoga practice, right, where you show up one day and it goes well one day, and the next day you're a lot tighter and poof, but you still showed up. You still put in the work to move forward. Just get started. Try.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so funny. I started a yoga practice, an
Yeah.
Ashtanga Mysore practice,
Mhm.
where you build your own practice based on this routine.
Mhm.
We have to get out of that all or nothing mentality. My goal is to do it every day, even if it's only 15 minutes, which seems like silly. Like the old me would think that's ridiculous. Then I would do nothing. And so
Right.
I just did 30 minutes. The primary series probably could take an hour and a half, but it's how many times are you showing up for yourself?
Right. Right. That's the other thing I love about it. This is an advertisement for Atomic Habits, this podcast.
Yeah.
But the other thing I love is whatever habit you're trying to set it low enough that you could do it on a day you have the flu, right?
Yeah.
Like no matter what. And you can always do more, but you
Yep.
want to make sure that you can deliver on that one bit. So even if it's, we're talking about intentionality, even if it's being intentional with the first 10 minutes of your day or the last 10 minutes, whatever kind of micro habit would work for you that you could do any day, no matter what, to show up with some intentionality.
Yeah. I love that. Well, this has been wonderful. And I'm so appreciative of you just sharing with our audience, sharing your wisdom, your lessons learned, and pouring into them. How can people get in touch with you? And I'll include this in the show notes as well.
Yeah, absolutely. My website is gambitcoaching.com. I'm on LinkedIn. Those are the primary places. Yeah, gambitcoaching.com.
Okay, great. Well, thank you once again for joining us.
Yes, thanks for having me. We should do it again.
Yes, let's plan on it. And for those of you listening, thank you for tuning in. Go to ratracereboot.com. So whatever platform you listen to your podcast on, please leave us a 5-star review or your comments. I do read those. And we often have free downloads on the ratracereboot.com site. Right now, there is a leadership quiz. So just find out how you're showing up, what you're inspiring in other people. You can take that little quiz and it can start a conversation. So thank you for listening. And remember, as always, everything is created twice, first in your mindset and then in physical form. Have a wonderful rest of your week, and we'll see you next week.